Our people's interpretation of being conscious has been distorted through white social engineering of our collective minds. We can grow locks, burn sage, eat kale, and drink alkaline water all day long. But until we address and overcome the evil white oppressor's monopoly over our minds, we are still extremely unhealthy. Because an unhealthy mind is the worst infliction of them all. To emancipate our minds from white mental slavery, we must stop misdiagnosing our condition. Black people, we must stop misdiagnosing our condition. Because if our understandings of our plight and condition are flawed, then all liberating remedies and strategies that stem from those misunderstandings will also be flawed. The oppressed must function based on what is true. Our condition is not the Stockholm syndrome. That condition is a natural occurrence that happens when the captive spend significant times with their captors and then adopts the ideology of their captors. Our condition is not a natural occurrence. Our condition is by deliberate design created through white social engineering. This is the fact of our condition that we must elevate our minds to understand. White social engineering scientists and propagandists determined a long time ago that the white society's monopoly over information and media images that are systematically fed into the collective minds of Black people could be exploited to shape the minds of the Black masses to think in ways that serves and protects the interests of the white society. More specifically, they exploit this monopoly to shrewdly indoctrinate Black self-contemptuous thoughts within the minds of many Black people that keeps our collective aggression shifted away from the white society and redirected towards our own people. It's how they prevent us from unifying ourselves against them. It's the true reason why many Black people are now self-loathing, perceives ourselves as being our own worst enemies, and reveres Caucasians in spite of brutal history to the contrary. It's always by deliberate design when the oppressed start thinking exactly as the oppressors wants them to think. The nefarious practice is called socialized. Black people have been socialized by white oppressive forces. Socialized is when the oppressors exploit their monopoly over information that are fed into the collective minds of the oppressed to manipulate the oppressed to think and behave in ways that serves and protects the oppressors. It literally makes the oppressed more compliant with their oppressors' dominance over their lives. Socialized is the scientific term given to which actually means to literally brainwash your people. The reason why most of us don't know that we've been brainwashed is because we've been successfully brainwashed. White oppressive forces began brainwashing Black people during our early education and development, when our minds are young and most impressionable. Through a whitewashed Black racially devaluing educational curriculum that withholds virtually all Black racially affirming facts from Black students. Doing so psychologically conditions us to perceive ourselves through a marginalized identity that makes us more compliant with white dominance over our lives. This brainwashing process is then reinforced throughout our entire lives through unrelenting Black racially demoralizing propaganda that keeps us believing the fraudulent worst about ourselves. This demoralizes us, divides us, creates Black self-loathing, and shifts our collective aggressions away from the white society and redirect it against ourselves. Keeping Black people believing the fraudulent worst about ourselves and the fraudulent less about ourselves aids the white society in maintaining their social dominance over us. White social science describes the nefarious practice as merely instilling a value system into the collective minds of a subordinate population that makes the subordinate population adhere to the authority and existing infrastructure of the dominant culture. The position secretly taken by the white government is that it's a governmental duty to protect its existing status quo from potential dissent that may rise among the oppressed population. Our core problem as Black people is that most of us can't see that our minds are being systematically and perpetually socialized to think in ways that serve the system of white supremacy. Millions of black people have been socialized to trust and revere only whites and to speak and to think less of their race. This is why we constantly walk around making unfounded negative generalizations about our race. It's not normal. This social engineering programming begins during our education development, like I said, when our minds are young and most impressionable. Education is much more than a matter of developing a student's cognitive abilities in math, language, and science. It is the process of imparting information, knowledge, and values which best enables students to realize their highest potential. Studies shows that how children behave is greatly influenced by what they're taught to believe about their particular group. Therefore, it is extremely important that children be taught of the many contributions made by their particular group. Students can then reference these information about their particular group to acquire their self-image and assess their potential and capabilities in relation to the information. Therefore, an educational setting that properly nurtures the aspiration and potential of a child is one that includes the many contributions made by the child's particular race or group. This is a basic human need, and it is the basis that children use as a point of reference for their potential. It is particularly important for children living under difficult circumstances to know about and be able to identify with members of their group that makes them feel good about being a part of that group. This basic human need is being deliberately withheld from black students during their educational development. White governed schools do not provide a racially affirming curriculum to black students as it routinely does so for white students. They instead intentionally give black students a marginalized version of their history. It's a marginalized version designed to instill the myth of white superiority and black inferiority into the subconscious minds of the black students. It is a classroom setting in which the majority of the achievements and contributions made by black people throughout history are systematically withheld from the education and development of black students. Black students are taught from curriculums that primarily exalts the history and achievement of whites only while marginalizes their own. In fact, for many black people, their schools are the place where they first experience the implication that there's something lesser about being born black. The white educational system's failure to adequately provide black students with a racially affirming curriculum, as it so routinely does so for white students, is actually essential for maintaining white social dominance over black people. Because for a ruling class to maintain its position of social dominance over its subordinate population, they must condition the subordinate population from a very early age to accept their own subordinate status and to adhere to the authority of the dominant society. To do so, the education given to the oppressed, from the time that their minds are young and most impressionable, must be the type that denies them of most of their racially affirming facts about their racial group. When the oppressed population is denied of a racially affirming curriculum, this conditions them to perceive themselves through an inferior identity. In fact, even the brightest among them have little hope of mentally extricating themselves from these feelings of inferiority. This is the true reason why black people are learning more black racially affirming facts from each other on social media than we do so from within our schools. Schools are tools of the government, designed to mold the student's character accordingly. Although all white governments publicly professes equality of all their citizens, in reality, they are all unrelentingly committed towards the preservation of their nation's white social dominance over black people. This unrelenting commitment necessitates that black students be socially engineered during their education and development to accept our subordinate status within the white dominant society. The white society will never give black students an education that truly liberates us. They will instead always miseducate black students to think in ways that serves and protects the system of white supremacy. This is our hidden reality. This black racially devaluing education is being pumped into the impressionable young minds of generations of black students without being counterbalanced by an equal amount of positive black racially affirming information. Consequently, black students must constantly resist the negative perception of being black implicit in an educational curriculum almost exclusively dedicated to white ideologies and achievements and contributions and history. Furthermore, black students are subjected to this black demoralizing miseducation for 7 hours a day from the age of 5 through 18. Clearly, considerable damage can be done to the self-esteem of many black students within such a large time frame. During the education development of black students, they are being literally brainwashed to subconsciously believe that they are inherently lesser than whites and to believe that whites are higher than us. While black students are actually being socially engineered to adhere to white dominance over our lives, while white students are being miseducated and socially engineered to believe they're inherently superior. This is why many white people find it impossible to work for a black employer because they've been conditioned to think they're superior. This socializing through miseducation is at the root of the profound feelings of inferiority that many black people experience and is at the heart of the internalized feelings of superiority that many whites possess. This is our hidden reality. This brainwashing socializing process is then reinforced throughout our entire lives through unrelenting black racially devaluing media propaganda campaigns that keeps the white media's unrelenting negative depiction of black people that amplifies the negative to the point that it distorts our reality. It's much more than just biased media reporting. It is actually an insidious black racially demoralizing divide and rule psychological warfare campaign. Demoralize and rule is a method of maintaining control over a targeted population through constant and unrelenting demoralization in order to create self-hatred and disunity, which attacks the core foundation of what bonds the people, and they can then be ruled over forever. Presently, white sources writes all black societal narratives and statistics and controls all black mainstream media images. The white society, therefore, literally owns black people's interpretation of our collective state. In a sense, black people's interpretation of ourselves remains enslaved by the white society. They exploit this unfair scenario to keep us believing the fraudulent worst about ourselves. It is a process with the objective to divide and erode the morale of the black population through continuous demoralization. By destroying our unity and morale, it can even prevent our will to fight. It's very effective. No group can be constantly inundated with negative, demoralizing misinformation about themselves and not suffer some adverse effect. It's not possible. This system is deployed like a massive media marketing campaign that constantly subjects black people to receiving only the fraudulent worst information about ourselves. Within this system, fraudulent black racially demoralizing propaganda is being pumped unrelentingly into the unsuspecting minds of the black population without being challenged nor counterbalanced by an equal amount of black positive racially affirming information. It conveys the subliminal message that black people are our own worst enemies and therefore needs whites to govern over our lives. Moreover, that black people should admire, respect, and trust only whites. This system is extremely effective because when black people are repetitively presented these noted narratives from trusted white media sources, it can be very difficult to resist its implied propaganda programming. Especially when the propaganda is being told daily and so unrelentingly. Its weapon is the demoralizing message that it carries and the way that it adversely affects the black population in terms of our behaviors. With time, being unable to refute the constant negative information about us, many black people eventually comes to accept it. They internalize it. Many black people then experience profound feelings of humiliation. And we ask ourselves, man, why we can't get our act together? Why we can't get our act together? This unrelenting humiliation then causes many black people to start becoming resentful towards their own people. We become demoralized, divided, self-loathing, and resentful towards our own racial group. In the most extreme cases, many will even attempt to separate themselves from other black people. Psychologists call this disassociation. It's a defense mechanism that evolves to put a distance between themselves and the source of the pain. Some will make it their personal mission to go out of their way to try to show white people, oh, we're not all bad. This is how we're being controlled. It's not a slave syndrome. This is all possible because people are like computers. All you have to do is keep giving them certain information every so often, and you can persuade an entire generation or an entire nation towards an applied objective. The mind is easy to manipulate when people don't know what's being done to them. It's a well-proven control system that taps into the immense power that shame has upon the human mind to mentally enslave millions of black people. It works through unrelenting demoralization. Some black people have been so demoralized that they literally find it easier to continue believing the fraudulent worst about themselves than to accept the truth that they're being lied to. Those black people that insist that they've confirmed their negative assessment of our race based upon their own individual experiences, so therefore they know it's true is being said about us, those black people are delusional. Because it's not humanly possible to assess the collective state of millions of people based upon anyone's individual experience. It's not humanly possible. Those false negative perceptions about our racial group were actually deliberately embedded into our subconscious minds by white oppressive forces, particularly white propagandists. They exclusively write all of our societal narrative. They control our mainstream media image. They own our interpretation of ourselves. The reason why many black people insist that they've confirmed their negative assessment about their racial group, although they've in fact not, is because once a false belief has been successfully embedded into the human mind, the individual will then only notice those incidents that appear to confirm the embedded belief and will become psychologically blinded by the great amount of evidence that refutes the embedded belief. This is why many insist that they've seen for themselves that the narratives are true when they are not. Then based upon this psychological blindness, they will insist that they confirm their negative assessment, although they have not. Because most of us want to be religious, we're easy victims for those who have studied how to hijack the mind. This thing is an inherent flaw within the human psyche that white oppressive forces have exploited to trap the minds of black people into a perpetual state of black self-contempt. They achieve this by manipulating millions of black people to believe the fraudulent worst about ourselves. And then we only notice those things that appear to confirm the programming, and we are psychologically blinded from seeing the great amount of things that refutes the programming. It is time to wake up to our reality. It's time to wake up to our reality. The time of believing in dumb shit is over. The time of believing in idiotic ideology is over. We have now been in this country for more than 400 years. You still believe in those idiotic ideologies? You should be ashamed of yourself. This psychological warfare system provides white oppressors with a more proficient method for controlling and subjugating black people, given that it isn't easily recognized or easily comprehended by its black victims. For unlike the past blatant racist systems that black people could easily identify and therefore develop counter strategies against, this system is not easily recognized, nor is it easily comprehended by its black victims. White racist tactics always works best when the black victims don't recognize it. This psychological warfare program works so well, in fact, that it not only makes black people more compliant with white dominance over our lives, in many cases, it makes many black people prefer white dominance over our lives. It's the true reason why millions of black people are now self-loathing, constantly makes unfounded negative generalization about our own race. There's nothing normal about that. Why many of us are perceived ourselves as our own worst enemies and reveres Caucasians in spite of a brutal history to the contrary. It's always by design when the minds of the oppressed aligns with the objectives of the oppressors. And this worked because the oppressed will always believe the fraudulent worst about themselves. This isn't some feeble-minded conspiracy theory. It's the damn truth. It's the truth that many black people have been brainwashed and minds have been dumbed down not to see. Those who know must teach. African proverb. This is the truth of our plight. And telling this truth is what puts my life in danger, but I must tell the truth. One love and peace.